and that's a sentence that you probably and that's a sentence that you're probably going to have to get used to saying. And that's a sentence that you're probably going to have to get used to hearing. And yes, I did. And yes, I did. And yes, I did copy and paste that from my last video. This time though, the crash is not Mazepin's fault. However, I do still think there are kind of worrying signs, albeit in a different way to Bahrain. To explain what I'm on about, let's look at it from Nicholas Latifi's point of view. To explain what I'm on about, let's look at it from Latifi's POV. To explain what I'm on about, let's look at it from Latifi's POV. He's just spun attack with Minerale. And is looking for other cars to see if he can rejoin safely. Just ahead of him is Sebastian Vettel. Just ahead of him is Sebastian Vettel, who started from the pit lane, so obviously he's dropped back to last. So that must mean he's dropped to the back. So that must mean that he's dropped to the back. So, which is not great, but it's still meeting. It's not great, but it still means he can pick his line, find the hang on. There is someone behind him. And it's a Russian lunatic. But at least it means... that's not great, but at least it means he can go nice and carefully, find the grip, pick his line, hang on. That's not great. That's not ideal for the race, but at least it means he can go as carefully as he likes. Pick his line. Find out where the grip is and hang on. There is someone behind him. And it's a Russian lunatic! Nicholas Latifi confirmed after the race that he had not seen Mazepin. And that he'd assumed that because Vettel was starting from the pit lane that he had dropped, and that he had assumed that because Vettel had started from the pit lane that he was at the back. Now this is a pretty poor mistake. To add to his spin at Aqua Minerale, this is a pretty poor mistake from Latifi. I know it's wet, but in F1 you just can't make these sort of assumptions. But it begs the question. It does beg the question. Why was Mazepin there in the first place? Because as I said before, Vettel started from the pit lane. Meaning that he had to wait for every car to go past him before he could even start. So Vettel would have been probably about 3 seconds behind the pack. So when Vettel started, he would have been probably about 3 seconds behind the pack. So the fact that Mazepin coming into Aqua Minerale is a sec. So the fact that Mazepin is about a second behind Vettel coming into Aqua Minerale means that he must have lost. Means that he must have lost 4 seconds in just half a lap. That sort of pace is worrying to say the least.